Hello and welcome to the A&P. I am Alex Johansson and my co-host Patrick McCallum. Patrick,
Hello, everyone. How are you getting on?
we're having logical discussions about the state of the world. Let's get into it, brother. Hey, Patrick, what's going on, bud?
Not too bad at all, buddy. Not too bad. So, what video did you bring me today?
Well, today, Dad Saves America. John Popola would like to talk to us about the cultural bell curve and why unlimited tolerance ends in communism. You remember communism?
Okay.
Engels, Marx, that whole thing?
Yeah, we were kind of, we've had a small bit of a dealings with that in Europe, all right?
But don't you have a socialist party in Ireland?
Oh, yes, we do actually have, the People Before Profit Party, yes. Actually, I remember us doing that episode. I thought you were quite impressed by them.
Yeah, no, I liked a different set of politicians and MPs.
But in fairness, they get one TD every year, in fairness.
Well, there you go. Just as long as the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach are not of that crew, I think we'll be okay.
Yeah, just the one guy every year.
Just the one. Probably represents some strange place in the back end of Dublin.
No, it's actually, I think he's, what part? Is it Dublin South? No. Yes, he's one of the Dublin TDs. The Dublin split into one building.
What's the name of that neighborhood you keep bringing up when we're playing that, what do you call it? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Ballymun.
Ballymun. You're like the post-apocalyptic.
Yes, he's actually the TD. He's actually the TD from that area.
It looks like it's been
That is the East constituency. It's a slightly neglected part of
right. Well, hopefully their TD gets in there and does the right thing. So let us see what Mr. Popola has to say about communism.
Okay.
We go. I'd like to propose that there's essentially three models of how to think about culture. When I say culture, what I'm really talking about is what do we accept? You know, what are the behaviors that are celebrated in our society?
So he's talking functionally about the Overton window.
Okay.
So there is acceptable behavior. There is behavior that is slightly beyond that band. There's behavior that you see and you say, oh, that's getting kind of close. And then there is behavior that will functionally get you shunned because it's in violation of social mores for that society.
Social norms.
Right? Yeah. Well, social mores. Social norms, sometimes people nut up a little bit, whatever. You're like, okay, I see there's a mental health thing there. We'll help the person out, right? But social mores is like the fabric of the culture. And when people tear that fabric, there are issues and there is consequences for the actions, right?
Yeah, so. I always say that to young people when they're traveling abroad is whatever country you travel to, do what the locals do. You know what I mean?
So when I was a young lad, I would read an author, Robert Anson Heinlein. Heinlein. And one of his things was, if everybody's rubbing purple mud in their belly button and it's not harming anybody, and it's just everybody seems to be doing it, and it's like, okay, that's innocuous. I guess we'll just rub purple mud in our belly button. Right? But it's that kind of thing. There are things that might be odd, but you're like, okay, this is just a purple mud thing, right? This is not going to tear me down. It's not going to cause me issues, and it's not pushing the Overton window out, right?
Yeah, it's like when young people go up to China for the first time and they see people spitting on the street, which is unusual, say, for Western Europe, but it's commonplace over there. So you just kind of okay, that's what they do here.
I've been in casinos where those of Asian descent will literally spit on the floor. They're spitting on the floor on the inside of a building. And you're like, well, that's kind of weird. Okay.
Yeah. It's mainly China, not mainly other Asian. Well, Vietnam, not in Japan. Basically, think countries around China. Probably the easiest way to describe it to people.
Have you ever had pork chops and applesauce?
Yes. Actually, had it the other day. Actually made it the other day.
Pretty good, right? It's one of my favorite meals. Pork chops, applesauce, maybe some asparagus, whatever. Throw in a potato, maybe some rice. I like that long grain wild rice. Uncle Ben's props, so good. So when I was growing up, in my household, my father said, pork chops are like steak. You take the knife and you take the fork and you cut it, and that's how you eat it, right? And then I went to a place called the South. Maybe you've heard of a place called the South in the United States?
Yes.
I went out and had dinner after my friend's church function, right? And we got served pork chops, and there was applesauce and all that stuff. But all I had for cutlery, my silverware, was a spoon. And I was like, so I just sat down and waited, and I watched grown folks, in violation of my father's own order, grab pork chops with their hands, dip it in the applesauce, and eat it that way. And I was like, what? Like, pork chops aren't finger food. My dad said you cut that, and then if you want the applesauce on it, you dip it on your fork in the applesauce. You know, like, oh, right. So it was just this little thing that they do different in the South. It's not a bad thing. You just grab a pork chop with your hand. I'm more than willing to grab ribs with my hand. More than willing to grab chicken with my hand. But oh my goodness, in my house, my old man drew the line at them pork chops with a knife and fork. Right? Like that's just how it was done. And since I didn't want to get knocked into next week, you're right. I don't want to walk around with my dad's boot in my ass. I was like, we're just gonna cut this pork chop up and eat it. But I didn't even know it was an option. It didn't. That's not even.
All right. I didn't know it was an option with pork chops either.
Well, in a place called the South in the United States, it's not only the option; it is the preferred method. And what was strange is these were folks who were wearing their church clothes. Right, we're wearing the church clothes, sitting. I don't know. I think it was someone's house, but it might have been a Cracker Barrel or some other fine Southern dining facility, right? Yeah. Anyway, but it's that kind of thing, right? That doesn't push an Overton window beyond the breaking point where you're like, you violated social mores. Stop doing the thing. That is bad.
Yes.
You're just picking up a damn pork chop, right? So.
That's on. No, let's see what the
or discouraged. And one way to think about this is along a graph. Now, I'm a bit of an econ nerd, so bear with me here. I got my Sharpie. The Y goes vertical, the X goes horizontal. And so along the X-axis, we're going to put a distribution of behaviors. Now, and along the Y-axis, up and down, I'm going to call this social acceptance.
See, so that is specifically an Overton window. He's specifically delineating the kinds of behaviors that are going to fall.
Yeah, he's just breaking it. Yeah, but what he's doing is just breaking it down more like Barney style for people, so they'll easily understand it and grasp it.
Right, it's a visual representation. I think this is actually pretty clever on his part. So
very high-end technology.
Oh yeah, the pen and paper. That's how we remember to do stuff here at the A&P. We write it down on Post-it notes because well, you know me and technology. It's not a fan of me. How many times you had to hold my hand?
It's not.
I'm going to send you the mittens. I don't need mittens. I'm just bad with the mouse. No, you're bad with technology, Alex. Shut up, Patrick. It's my feelers.
Yeah, especially when I tell you stop touching the buttons.
I just want it to be right, man. All right, let's check out this Overton window on socially acceptable behaviors.
I think that the conflict of visions that has been going on in our culture is about what the shape of the curve of behaviors and social acceptance should be and how to think about that. Now, most of the world throughout human history has had a fairly rigid structure. Not perfectly rigid, but I'm going to draw it for the sake of argument. And it looks a little something like this. There's this range of what's acceptable, maybe it's mom and dad and kids. That's all right. Maybe it's a king and a queen lording over everyone, telling them what to do. All right? And if...
Not the greatest artist, but I think I'm getting where he's going.
Yes. You know what? He's actually doing a very, very, very good. Very good job actually explaining to people.
Yeah, well, that's why I brought you the video. I thought it was fairly succinct, and it's not that long.
Yeah,
so
very well done, actually. Very, very good.
Certainly we can dig into this well, so let's get digging.
If you're not down with the program, if you're not in the good graces of the accepted order, you're chucked right off the edge. That's it. You're either in the group or you're out. We are groupish, tribal creatures. It is.
Yeah, so we're social
Yes.
animals, right?
Yeah.
So for our continued existence, if we have folks who don't get with the program, then they're violating
They
the
voted off the island so long ago.
right. Well, because they're
Yeah.
so far outside of the Overton window, you're like, we can't accept the behavior. But
No.
as that window expands, then more and more intolerable behavior becomes more acceptable, and then you end up having people forced into trust groups that should not be in those trust groups, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's like with diversity, equity, and inclusion, that inclusion thing can sometimes be bad because it forces inclusion of those who don't have the set of morals or ethics that the group has. It doesn't hold them to be a truism, right?
I think diversity and inclusion works if there's a good set of rules behind it. I've seen it work quite well in our third level educations
Right,
system.
right.
As there's
Diversity and
good
equity
other
is
rules now.
great. Equity is a bad word too, but inclusion is, I think, the bad one. Diversity is
Yes,
fine.
I think both. I think it's being kind of hijacked
Right. So
in certain
diversity,
parts of the world.
yeah, as long as it's diversity of thought and we have a marketplace of ideas that can be manipulated and discussed and that kind of stuff. If you have equity as far as we have an equal opportunity on the front end, but not equality of outcomes, I think they hijack that term for equality to be equality of outcomes. But the inclusion one's the bad one. As the Overton window expands and you are forced as a society to accept ill behavior because it must be included because we have to be nice to folks, right? But they're a little strange. No, they're not a little strange. They're actually violating the social mores.
Yeah.
They're outside the norm in a bad way. So here we go.
How we evolved. It is how most of human history has gone. Tribal warfare, a certain degree of war of all against all. And we still see this in a lot of places around the world. For example, if you happen to be gay and you live in Iran, you're getting thrown off the building. Literally, this is like a drawing of a thing that will actually happen.
Where's for Palestine?
Yeah.
I would certainly like them to go to Gaza. That would be amazing.
I think have you actually noticed a lot of protests in the last, say, a couple of weeks, especially? You don't see many rainbow flags there anymore. Well, it's just not the protest I see.
Well, I've been checking on that, but it might be my algorithm. But I think some of them now understand that they would get flying lessons if they went. They would get thrown. Yes. They would get chucked right off of buildings. And I don't know.
I think the novelty of the protest is worn off.
You're supporting something that is specifically destructive to your chosen way of life.
Yeah.
Right. Nature or nurture, you have chosen to be in that niche. That is your space. But there are peoples and places where those things are absolutely unacceptable. And like you said, you will get thrown. And he's got, like, if that were a building in Gaza and they went there, that's exactly what that would look like. Not the king and the queen, but literally everybody in the neighborhood would take you right up to the top of the next big high thing and toss you right off it. Right?
Yeah.
For a thing in the Western world that's acceptable. I don't care if someone is gay. Be gay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you not hurting me? Are you not in my space? Are you not telling me I have to do a thing because you do it?
Yeah.
Cool.
I think a lot of young people don't realize is when they jump on these protests, they should really research what they're protesting. No matter what protest it is, they should just fully research it, and then after fully researching, they want to go and protest, off with them, but just don't jump on the bandwagon.
Well, I've seen a ton of them get asked questions. From the river to the sea. Which river? Which sea? Yeah. Which river? Well, that would be the Jordan River. What sea? That would be the Mediterranean Sea.
Yeah.
And this goes back to the League of Nations and la 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 la. We've gone into that before, and we're going to go into it again. But the reality of the situation is your social norms where you are not acceptable for the place that you're saying you want to help save in some kind of way. right?
Yes, yes.
So it's disingenuous because you don't know the background at all. And don't get me wrong, the Middle
No.
East has got a murky background, and it is
Mm.
just there's a lot going on there, man. It's pretty adversarial in general.
Yeah,
So
it's got a very, very long ancient history.
mhm.
So I don't like that. I don't think that is great. Obviously, a lot of people agree. And so the response to this, or the perception of this, is a different graph. So this, the rigid building, and there's one variation of this, right? Which is sometimes it's not exactly a cliff, but it's a steep stair step. You could call this a caste system, like was in place in India or even in pre-modern England, right? You've got the king, you've got the king's court, you've got the knights, you've got the aristocracy, and then you've got the serfs. This is feudalism, looks something like the stair step. So you're not immediately either in or out, like in small tribes or in Iran, but you really feel it where you shift from high acceptance, high approval to low. In response to this was a movement, I would say, starting in the 19th century and really coming to full flower in the 20th, which said, no. That distribution, I'm just going to put B along the bottom and SA along the top. This distribution where we judge, it shouldn't be like that at all. It should be like this. Wherever you are along the distribution of different behaviors is fine. It's totally acceptable. There's actually nothing you can do that is more right or wrong than what I want to do.
There's a problem inherent in that, and I'm sure he's going to get into it.
Yeah, I presume he will.
But it would seem to me that that's errant in its formation, right?
Mm.
Because you are then going to be forced to violate someone's, I'm going to use the word rights, but more like the rights of an Englishman, right? You understand the term, right? So
yeah.
Right, and not to be negative against Ireland, because I know you guys have had a tiff with England for quite a while. But the rights of an Englishman is a set of things you understand that you will not do to another person, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to do that. When you throw that out the window and everything becomes arbitrary, then there's no way to judge the behavior on its safety to the rest of that society, right?
Yeah.
Because there's no benchmark,
No.
right? The Overton window is thrown out, and if all things become acceptable, then why do we even have a criminal code of any kind at all, right? And then once you remove that criminal code, and this is not a situation where you go, this is a crazy idea, right? And then you work it out to its maximum, right?
Yes.
Well, everything's acceptable. Right, but if you work it to its maximum, it's going to be harmful in general to everyone.
Yeah,
right.
That's the problem. You take away all the rules that govern a society, you're just going to have anarchy. He probably will go into, by the way.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he will.
Yeah, he will.
I'm not trying to foreshadow. I'm just trying to put my 2 cents in here to see where I'm thinking this is going. I could be completely wrong, but here we go.
This is moral relativism. This is postmodernism. This is communism. Communism says social acceptance can take many forms, one of which is compensation. One way you can think about social acceptance in the society, status, is a kind of compensation. There are actually a lot of areas where people would rather have status than money. Academia is a great example of a place where status is often traded off for money, although frankly, they all still get paid too much relative to people who create a lot more value for others. But
those were facts right there.
Yeah.
Sometimes people in really fuzzy academic spaces who don't really contribute to infrastructure forward function or the greatering of our society receive kudos way, way beyond their value and what they contribute. You can actually check it by the amount of times that their papers are cited in other papers. And if that is below a certain threshold, then they're not actually contributing, and they've been given acumen that they don't have, right?
Yeah, you can see that quite a lot actually, and especially in a lot of universities. If you go more into the arts,
well,
like I would say, don't get me wrong, I have great respect for people in arts, but some of the art professors.
Well, the place I see it the most,
what we used to call them is, sympathy hires.
Right. DEI hires now, but the place where I see it the most in the United States is doctorates of education. It's functionally the easiest doctorate to get in the United States, but their doctoral theses are barely, and I mean barely ever cited, percentage-wise. I think more than 50 or 60% of them have less than 2 cites in other papers further on down the line. So it means that they're not actually contributing. And if you go back and look through them, there was the Ms. Gay, who was the president of Harvard, was found in her doctoral thesis to have plagiarized a huge portion of her doctoral thesis. And then as opposed to being fired for certain kinds of fraudulent activity, she then just got shifted somewhere else at Harvard and is still making almost $1 million a year. This was last year.
When that come up?
Last year.
No, but when all right.
Mm-hmm.
Is that when that information came out about her?
Yes.
Last year.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was after she went and sat, I believe Harvard, Penn State, and another university chancellor were in front of Congress, and they were asking about anti-Semitic stuff. Can you say that not so much the law, but do the rules of your university dictate a certain kind of behavior that is occurring in your schools to be inappropriate? And as opposed to saying, yes, we think X thing is wrong, they danced around the problem. They just danced around it. They're like, well, no, you don't get to, and that's it. That he's talking about, that acceptance of certain kinds of behavior. Like,
but it's interesting seeing what's going on with Harvard at the moment. Everyone seems to be piling on them. And
probably for good reason.
It's funny because it is one of the top universities over there.
Well, it's one of the top universities in the world, but again, we've force included people who shouldn't be in that space. Their test scores, their SATs, their GPA is not high enough, right? And certain kinds of students have been left to the wayside who would have qualified on merit and had the appropriate academic acumen.
A massive issue across your universities, all across the United States.
Yes.
Ever since they've been privatized.
It's not good. Right. But the thing is, they're still getting federal funding, but they're performing acts that are in violation of U.S. Civil Code. Right?
I think the problem is that with the whole educational system over there is whoever has the biggest wallet will get into college in a lot of ways.
Yes.
But there are very, very unfair system.
Oh, I agree. And we will actually have to do an episode on that in the future, but we should probably get back to communism.
So, yes.
Your favorite subject. Engels, Marx, all that.
They aren't making the most money you can make in the society. And they're also, frankly, quite envious and jealous about that. That's a big reason why academics hate people like Elon Musk or Steve Jobs or the merchant class writ large. So they want to flatten out the distribution. Everything is fine. There is no way to be that is any more right or wrong than any other way to be. The problem that runs into is that while you could say it is a step in the right direction, as compared to being thrown off the building, the bottom of the social acceptance axis is obviously death. If you really aren't socially accepted, you get the death penalty in a lot of societies, including our own. So saying, look,
you get restricted from lots of access if you get wild like that. And a lot of that has to do with you become incarcerated for violating social mores. You end up committing felonies, and you can end up committing them over and over and over again because you just don't accept the social standard of the society in which you live. You will commit violent acts or other kinds of acts that are horrifically inappropriate. And when you get voted off the island for that by becoming incarcerated, you've cast your vote for where you want to be. Right?
You shouldn't be killing people.
Every country has that kind of rule set, as they said.
Right. Well, then understand there's two kinds of laws on the books functionally for criminal behavior, right? There are laws that are anti-evil or if you cause distress, right? If you cause others to lack flourishing specifically and individually, that is what is functionally referred to and understood to be in society a sin against that society. Not so much against religion, but a sin against that society, right? Brutal acts of mayhem and murder and battery, right? And the naughty battery, which we're not going to say the name of, but we all know what that is.
Yeah.
Right? It's a bunch of grapes. Anyway, so when that happens, you vote yourself off the island very specifically.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
But then as we tend to attempt to accept more behaviors with this model where everything becomes acceptable, then you, your children, your grandchildren, your nieces, your nephews, all the people who are connected to you are going to be in a much less safe society if this is accepted over time. Just that's how it bears out. And then it turns into communism, right? And what he's talking about here is the academics who decide that they should be the one to distribute those assets. And it turns out that when they get power, they're not going to give the power up, and they're not always going to act in such a way that is best for society.
I think some people should look up what we studied in college years ago called the prison experiments.
Oh, those are funny. Well, they're not funny. They're bad, but it's a
it just
funny.
shows if a person's put in charge of another person, when the power is imbalanced.
Mm-hmm. Well, they also do this.
The hero becomes a villain very quickly.
They also do this with school children, where they do the blue eye, brown eye thing. Have you seen that one?
I did actually. Was it you sent it on? No, it was another friend of mine sent it on to me. I'm just thinking they're sending it to me through Facebook. But yes, I remember we were talking about this.
Right.
With a friend of
when
mine
you
one
say
time.
certain people are better based on immutable characteristics, then you flip it, and then neither group is nice to the other group. They're just not, because they have a measure of control, and they can say and do things. And this has to do with othering as well. Like once I other someone, then I'm allowed to do whatever I want to do to them because they have been othered.
You'll see that quite a lot. Well, we've seen it quite a lot play out in the last couple of years, especially not just in Europe, but all over the world.
Yep.
There's us versus them mentality all the time.
Mm-hmm. That's when you get things
it's very,
like...
very, very scary. You see that quite, as you see, or even over in your own country at the moment.
Yeah, well, and I think the biggest one of those in modern history is probably the Holocaust, honestly.
Yeah.
That's a massive othering.
Yeah, you can see an awful... When you're watching the news in the last couple of years especially, you see very much us versus them mentality across the board. There's very little discourse on either side. It's scary to see sometimes. Especially the language they use is very not good, is the best word I could describe it.
Right. All right, let's see what he's got to say.
Well, in fact, we shouldn't even be judging anyone. It sounds good. You know what's also on here? No shame. No discomfort. This is the graph of speech is violence, of everything should be normalized. That's what this is. The first problem it runs into, without even talking about reality or human nature, which is the biggest one, but the first one is simple hypocrisy. Because as we've seen, the people who want this, they use a lot of words for it, but they all mean the same thing. Justice, equity, inclusion. Hey, every behavior is included in this model of reality, in the postmodern utopia, the blank slate. The problem is you can't actually do that. And multiple people have pointed this out.
Have you seen on the interweb nets when you have an expert in a subject and they say, after years of researching this subject, whatever it is, I've come to these conclusions, right? I'm an expert in my field. I'm a physicist. I'm a theoretical physicist.
Years of proper experimentation and research, this is my conclusion.
These are my hypotheses based on all these experiments, all this data, all this stuff.
Yeah.
Right. That eventually grows into a theory, which a scientific theory isn't just a haphazard thing, right? Theory generally in society means a hypothesis, but theory in science means it is as close to fact as it can be, right? But then you have someone somewhere on the interweb nets who says, I disagree with you because feelings.
Yes. Yes, right? I've seen that too.
I disagree with you because of my emotional investment in you being wrong or me being right on the
subject. I feel you're wrong. Can you prove it? No, but I feel it.
No.
Yes,
but the
I've
thing
seen
is,
that. I've seen those arguments. Yes.
A lot of time in the court of public opinion, because an opinion just feels better than the scientific fact, right? The proven hypothesis, or beyond that, a theory, right?
Yeah. I think that's young and old people when they're looking for the quick headline and solution instead of the long-winded, well thought out argument, if you know what I mean.
Right.
They're looking for the quick soundbite.
That's why a marketplace of ideas that can be challenged is much healthier than I disagree with you because feelings.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
I think that's why science is so important to always nurture, because do they get it wrong sometimes? Yes, but most of the time they do get it after years of research. It's usually on the money.
So have you heard of reduction to absurdity or the appeal to the extremes?
Yes, I've heard of that. Right. Actually, I was on a different podcast, but yeah.
So reductio ad absurdum or the appeal to extremes. So I'm a physical physicist or theoretical physicist, right? And I say X, Y, Z, right? In this order, this is how this works because blah. And we've done the experiments, we've done all the things. And someone says, hey, counter argument, da-da-da-da, right? Yeah. And then you show them, hey, if the thing you're saying is true, this is the end result. They're like, no, it's not. And you're like, no. Because of syllogistic reasoning, you literally can't hold that position. So we're going to have to try again. But that person, their feelings get hurt and they say, I'm offended, which then is somehow counter. All right.
Yes.
Here we go.
Yes.
One of which is Herbert Marcuse, who noted that to maintain this vision, you end up with the same thing you were trying to escape because you end up back here, because all that you really have now is everyone here that's a communist is fine, and anyone that's not for communism is called a fascist and thrown off the roof. That's cancel culture. That's the notion of repressive tolerance. We can't tolerate the intolerant. And the intolerant...
Intolerance could just be someone whose nature is a little bit more feisty or disagreeable.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And then once you go down that road of someone is slightly disagreeable and they're not part of the in crowd, then we throw them off the building, right?
Yes. By send them off to the Gulag.
The Gulag Archipelago by Solzhenitsyn?
Yes.
Yes. That, I read those. That was very uncomfortable reading. Probably some of the most difficult reading of my entire life. It took me a couple years to get through those books. And I can generally read a book in a couple days. And those were just...
Yeah, I say it is rough going. But I think before young people go down the road of any kind of extremism, either wherever it might be or wherever they're leaning towards, read these books. Or...
We'll link them.
Yeah, we'll link them down below. There's a couple of books I'll link down below, but just read them. The books we're going to link.
Right, and realize they're very, very difficult. If you just get like a chapter every couple weeks, it is going to open your eyes to some of the horrific things that have happened to humans in the past. And that's
especially when you go down the extreme either communism or extreme fascism, and one of the books I'm going to link in.
Right, and then from the center, you wrap around, they hit the same place. The same thing happens. People die, and flourishing becomes a thing of the past. And the controlling class dictates all actions, movements, and activities, and then you lose any right to any kind of movement or freedom of expression or freedom of movement, right? The things that we hold dear in Western society. So
yeah, I know people give out about democracy in a lot of ways, but it's the best of a bad lot. I'll put that way to you. You read some of these books.
Well, it's because people are generally disagreeable. So you have to get into a situation where there can be compromise. If there isn't a way to get compromise, then people just get thrown off the freaking building.
They get voted off the island.
Big time.
The most stridently seek this is anyone to the right of Bernie Sanders, including Bernie Sanders himself, actually. So that's problem number one with the blank slate postmodern utopians that are really the moral philosophical core of wokeism and cancel culture and all the stuff that I think we've been beaten over the head with ad nauseum to the point of majorities of basically every single group voting for Donald Trump in 2024. I think that's the message I got from that is, you know what, you people talk about this, but really you're throwing us off the roof and we're sick of it. We don't want this. This leads me to the idea that I think we have to really confront that comports with reality. I think it's best understood as the cultural bell curve. And that is to say that for any activity, there is going to be a distribution of what is and is not normal. That's where the idea of normalize comes from. What
Again, Overton window.
is accepted?
Yes.
What is the norm? Everything can't be the norm by definition. I think we have to confront the reality that we end up with something that looks like this. This is the cultural bell curve. There is a set of activities up here that are the majority of behavior that we admire, that we celebrate, that we reward. And then there's stuff out here that we say, no, not, don't do that. And in the middle ground here is stuff that's like, more like you get the side eye, you do have a cost imposed. You are a little weird. You're a little different. You're a little awkward.
So I watched Sam Harris one time, and he put it this way. He said, if someone tells you and they legitimately believe that Elvis is still alive, they will be punished in the court of public opinion for that.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
If you're like, no, hey, lemonade. Anyway, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Right?
Whatever it is. Yeah.
There's a place where people give you, like he said, the side eye. Flat
side
earthers.
eye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give them the hairy eyeball. Bro, I'm not.
It might be those people I saw online during lockdown. Do you see that thing on lockdown? Where people started saying birds weren't real.
That's because they weren't allowed outside to touch grass, and they got a little crazy, and our children really didn't
But lots of people actually bought that.
Oh my God. All right, let's get back to
yes.
You're the kooky cousin. So what am I talking about? Well, let's think of a couple different examples, all of which are going to be offensive to somebody. So buckle up.
I like this part. This is my favorite part.
Okay.
The it could be offensive part. I dig this the most.
Oh, okay.
I hope this guy cooks up a couple of real good ones.
Okay. Let's see.
The first one I think is obvious. Sexual behavior. At the top is the thing that continues to make procreation possible. That is mom, dad, get married first, then have kids and stay together. Top of the social acceptance bell curve. It happens to also be the top of the human flourishing bell curve. If you do that, you will be happier than if you don't.
And that's actually scientific, data sets have shown that is the best and safest way for humans in this society to function. I neither agree nor disagree. Hey, you do you, boo-boo, right? But again, listen to what I'm saying, right? I'm saying something that may not so much purport with reality, right?
But As I say, yeah, I've seen it myself over the years. People who are married are generally happy. Well, it depends on.
Right. But the thing is what
But
you
there
have
are two
there.
people who are genuinely in love and stay
Right.
together.
But what you have there
happy.
is anecdotal evidence, right?
Yes.
Right. From what I have seen, right? But there are
Yes.
actual data sets that show
there's data
what
for
he
that,
just said is the way that contributes the most to human flourishing. This specific set of events in that order produce the best kinds of socially adjusted humans and generates the most flourishing. It is as close to fact as it can be, right?
Yeah.
So.
Them's the facts. That is the most well-studied social science thing around. And a lot of the people that have studied it are lefty types who don't like the patriarchy, and they're forced to confront the fact that if you want happy, healthy kids, having mom and dad is optimal. Where does that leave everybody else that's not fitting into that? Well, you used to say if you didn't get married and you were a woman, you were a spinster and you're over here in the side eye category.
So shame.
Yeah.
Right? Shame.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you were gay or if you fell in love with someone of a different race, you used to be over here. You used to be in the ostracized, maybe even physically assaulted side of the spectrum. Now, over time, these norms change. And frankly, that's where all the action is in social evolution. You could call it progress or not, but that is the battle we all face. That is even the battle that the blank slaters have asserted. See, that's what they were going after. They were going after, hey, you want to change your gender? You want to marry your dog? I'm not going to judge. It's all good, man. That's in the best kind of version of that, what they're going after. No one should feel shame for the thing they want to do. The problem is some people should feel shame for the thing they want to do. That's the facts. You're either going to have.
There are shameful things that people do. And in society now, they're like, you can't judge me. And here's the big one that I hear that drives me nuts. You've probably heard this too. Like, it's my truth. It's my truth.
Wow.
What the
Okay.
fuck does that mean? What does that mean?
What? I actually haven't heard that. It's my truth.
Yeah. So it's a justification for bad behavior, right? Or it's justification for holding a kind of idea or concept, right? So let's say in the marketplace of ideas, someone tells me some wild shit. Hey, Mr. Johansson, Alex, here, check this out. This is some wild shit. And I'm like, that doesn't purport with reality. It in no way comports with any portion of reality. And they're like, well, it's my truth.
Yeah. Wow.
It means nothing. So then what? Then I say, I disagree with you. And they can say, well, I'm offended because it's my truth. Right? And that's what these kids are being taught in college. If you believe a thing to be true, the mere belief in the thing gives it merit, except that's not the case.
Wow. Wow. I just, that's definitely a new one. And yeah, God help the younger generation. Jesus.
Well, I've had people engage me in concepts. And when I say, I don't quite think it's that way. Very gentle, right? I reduce the amount of offensive words, swear words, foul language, epithets. I'm like, okay, well, I understand you're saying that. Do you have anything of evidentiary value? Anything that
improve?
Yeah. Can this comport with reality? And I start from the initial position that I may be wrong, right? Please show me where there's errancy in my logic. Hey, let's set up a syllogistic argument. Let's take these premises. Let's find true and correct conclusions.
I was going to say, I know how this train is going to.
Right. But but I don't generally put it that way. I don't say, welcome to Philosophy 101. We're going to learn some stuff about how syllogisms work and reductio ad absurdum and all these. No.
Yeah.
I would just like you to tell me a thing that maybe lends credence to your concept. And then as soon as I come across with, well, there's a study, there's a thing, there's peer-reviewed documentation, there's a theory, there's a hypothesis that's been socially tested, they're like, well, I believe it, and that's pretty much good enough because it's my truth, right? And that way, That way lies the devil. Ha-Satan, the opposer, right? That's the bad direction to go. And not even in a religious sense, but just in an oppositional sense, because you don't like the structure, or the structure isn't giving you a thing you want for a lack of effort, Karl Marx. Anyway, here we go. Yeah. Oh, Marx.
Have shame, or you're going to have tyranny. That's the choice we face. That's what's so difficult about living in a diverse society of actual real human beings. Because for starters, real human beings actually end up looking something like this. We've got the norm, and then we've got the outliers. We've got, polygamy, and we've got divorce, and we've got gay marriage, which is not right at the top. It's a little, it used to be down here. Now it's more like here. Now, of course, if you work at Ogilvy and Mather, or you watch typical commercials on television for some reason, I don't know why anybody's still doing that. Well, then, these two, they're at the top, man.
Yeah, divorce and gay marriage are aggrandized to a point where I just can't even, it's very strange. I've seen some commercialized television recently, and it's, I don't see things I used to see when I was a kid. Right? Just, I see lots of multicultural and gay stuff constantly. It's like, I'm like, okay, that's fine, right? But every commercial, everything I see is pushing these things. I'm like, that's just weird. And that's why NPR and PBS had some issues recently with Congress, because a lot of their stuff was agenda driven, and it wasn't an agenda that was contributing to the flourishing of people in Western countries. It just wasn't, right?
So. All right. Okay.
They're every Jaguar ad you watch. And look, that's a kind of progress, but this is what reality actually looks like. And it's actually the way reality kind of should work, because so much of reality works that way. Before I move on from sexual mores, I got to address the worst example. The one that, frankly, as a sometimes uncouth South Philly guy, sends my head to dark places. And that is, out here is pedophilia. Out here is people who are truly deranged to the point of wanting things that are criminal.
So, this is rough. Okay, so in the United States, I'm not sure about the EU, but there is a movement called MAP, which is Minor Attracted Persons.
Yeah, we have seen that in the...
Right. So
there was a report actually in Euronews, so I've cut across you there.
Right. If you don't want to hear this, push forward about 60 to 90 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, we'll go. You can turn it off in the next 2 minutes and skip forward, as they say.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So
we have the same movement over here as well.
Right. So the problem is an agency issue, right?
Yes.
So children do not have agency. Children represent our future. And if we allow those who are that far outside of the Overton window to enact what it is they want, then it is in violation of the agency of our children.
Yes.
Which should be anathema to anyone. So we'll let him cook, and then we will let you know in the comments where to go to from this point, approximately 48 minutes.
I'll put a chapter thing in the whole lot of this.
Good. Okay, so let's let him finish
make
cooking.
it easy for people to navigate, as they say.
Yeah, this is a tough subject, and all right, let's let him do his thing here.
Rapists, murderers, but in the sexual domain, rapists and pedophiles, they're out here. And what's creeped so many people out is that these folks have decided, under the guise of things like queer theory, that should be looked at differently, that we should even talk about it differently.
It should not be talked about differently. It is a violation of the agency of children and their parents. It is not good. It is definitely a bad thing. And if a father out there thinks it's a good thing and somebody touches their daughter in a way that removes the agency of that daughter and your ability to be a parent, that's a problem. That is unsafe.
And they should. Oh,
yes.
As I said, we had the same weird, creepy weirdos here as well.
Yeah, not good.
They're not child predators. They're minor attracted persons. This is what has been ripping our society apart, is delusion. I'm not saying we should lock this in stone. I'm just saying we shouldn't pretend it can't exist. A couple more examples before we wrap things up. In the domain of health, it's pretty obvious, and we've seen the example of the blank slate utopians going to war on reality. Behaviors, social acceptance.
He's writing again.
What is this? Well, in the realm of health, at the center here is fit and thin. Fit and thin. That's the facts. That's healthier. It's healthy to be thinner. It's healthy to be fit. I realize that people have all kinds of genetic forces at work that make it harder for some than others. But them's the facts. Right here is where the health is at.
Yeah, that shouldn't be controversial at all. Like at all.
Yeah, it shouldn't. You know what makes me laugh is you're right. It should not be there shouldn't be any argument with that. There shouldn't be. There shouldn't be any argument.
So if anybody wants to, they can do the following. If you look up pictures from the early 1940s, right around Pearl Harbor time, in the city of New York, they had thousands upon thousands of men coming from the countryside and cities all over to go join the army to go fight in the war. And they took pictures of the lines of people wrapping around buildings so that they could have the opportunity to serve our country in a time of need. There was not a single fat kid in that line. From age 14 to 44, not one fat kid. None of them were overweight at all. And all of them wanted to have the opportunity to defend our country and give their lives, right?
Yes.
And it's the same thing all over Europe.
Yeah.
Young, fit men and some women who wanted to make the ultimate sacrifice to defend our way of life. And our way of life, very, very cultural norm at the time, right? Whatever that cultural norm was, right? And fit and thin was the way that it was. There was not a lot of obese people around. There just wasn't.
Wasn't, no.
No.
And you know how it became so why people just glamorize all this really unhealthy lifestyle.
Oh, man. I saw a really hilarious, that man on the street interview, right? So a gentleman approaches a group of young ladies and asks the question, so what do you think of this person? What do you think of this person? Like, give me a rating, 1 to 10. They're like, hey, what do you think of Lizzo? Oh, Lizzo's a 10. And he's like, you know what? I noticed you kind of look like Lizzo. She slapped the taste out of this dude's mouth. Just whap. And he's like, you just said that Lizzo's a 10. I said you look like a 10. Functionally, some of the most beautiful people on the planet, and you slap me in the face. Feels a little disingenuous, right? Lizzo is obviously not fit and thin. Obviously not. Right?
No.
So there's this weird juxtaposition on things that here's what purports with reality, and then I say a thing and you want to get physical? Right? That's very strange, right? All right, let's let him cook on this one.
And it used to be where the social acceptability was at. There's two sides to this one, which is why I put this in the middle at that sort of median, the norm. On one side, you've got, I would say, too thin. Right? Over here. This is anorexia. This
bulimia.
This is obsessive compulsive problems. This is all the creepy models that you see in Fashion Week that it's like, is this whose vision of attractiveness is this? It's men who don't like women who put that together. That's what's going on with that.
Ooh, that's a funny one. Men that don't like women put that out.
Women. Okay.
Oh, okay. So
All right.
androgyny is the attractive factor there, I suppose.
Yeah.
So that's on one side. It's working out to the point of having such a low BMI that you're really unhealthy. And on the other side is obesity.
The bufferillas, the heffalumps.
This is another example of where these people have screwed our society over and wrecked the culture. I understand why. It doesn't feel good to be shamed for being overweight or for and as someone who has dear loved ones who have suffered with eating disorders, it doesn't feel great to have your body image be a mess and to
The shaming thing in that instance is very interesting because now you just can't, right? You just can't. And when you do, when you're like, whoa, hey, you packed on a couple of pounds there, maybe you should shed a few stone, like you've gained a little weight there, fella, right? Say that to a female person in society. See what happens next. Right?
Oh, God. Yeah, we all know who that would work out for you.
Honey, got a little extra going on there in the hip and ass region. You might want to look at that, right?
Yeah,
You'll get the taste slapped out your mouth. Somebody will come and beat the brakes off you for saying things. And it's the reality. Maybe old girl got a little heavy. Maybe she decided after having a couple babies she didn't want to work out. Whatever the thing is. But if you bring, this is the reality. You're heavy set, right? I sustained an injury. I gained 50, 60 pounds. Feels bad, right?
Yeah.
And I know that people look at me differently than when I was super physically fit. When I was yoked up and throwing kids around, jujitsu, whatever, right? Whatever I was doing, right? Like, hey, that fella's in shape, right? You get better looks from the opposite sex. You certainly do when you look good. Right? When you don't look good, you don't get those looks. And that's not a form of shame. That's just the reality of society, right? I don't want to breed with that, dude.
I've always said that to young men and women when they're, one of my previous jobs, I was dealing with a lot of young people, and weight and fitness was one of those issues that we usually let them bring it to us kind of attitude.
Yeah, well, they're fucking with their phones and they're eating fucking donuts, right? They're not getting out of the house and touching grass. They're just getting fat.
But as I said to young people, so there's gyms all around our town. They have rates for kids 16 to 18, that kind of way. Yeah. There's student discounts. There's tons of free sports out there.
Oh, yeah.
Or even if you're not into sports or the gym, just walk. Walk every day.
Swim, ride a bike, something.
Yeah. There's loads of different ways of getting fit.
Humans are endurance animals. We do good when we push ourselves, right? We do really well. Not only that, exercise gives us amazing endorphins and a lot of positive things in our lives that make us happier in general, right?
Yeah.
So, all right, let's get back to dude.
You hate yourself. I don't want you to hate yourself. I don't want you to be dealing with kids who are struggling with body image. But in pursuit of a world with no shame, we entered a world where during the pandemic, people felt uncomfortable talking about the fact that the overweight were more at risk from dying of COVID.
The overweight are more at risk for everything.
Yes.
All of the things, right?
Yeah.
That's the reality of the situation. That is what purports with reality. If you are unhealthy in any way, it is going to be more difficult for you to recover, either too thin or too fat, if something were to happen to your physiology.
Like, even if young people just look up any of the last couple of years on YouTube, any of the YouTubers, big YouTubers, who are into what's it called, extreme eating.
Oh,
or
was that extreme
like
eating
that.
and what, like some ASMR stuff's pretty weird like that too, right?
Yeah. But a lot of them are dying in their droves.
Oh yeah. Very strange. It's like, and it's, you know what? I find it gross, but
yes.
If
you're overweight, or if you're slightly overweight, your body can manage it. But if you're extremely overweight, you're going to be dead in the next 15 to 20 years without a shadow of a doubt.
Right, because your body just can't support what you've done.
And it can't do it.
And as your body
bodies are not built for that.
Right, and as your body makes more fat, it builds more fat because we're survival animals. right?
Yeah.
It used to be you packed on some fat to get through the winter months because your body was going to need it. But now that we
Yes.
don't have winter months and we have regulated heating and air and, you know, all that kind of stuff, like we can just get gross because we don't have to go outside
Yeah.
and touch grass. We just don't. We don't have to sweat for it. We just
No.
sit in our caves and just get fat. So,
Yes.
That we could be healthy at any size. That's false. It's always going to be an open question.
absolute false flag, yes.
Yes.
What should be the norm? This graph I've put together here, this social acceptance, this cultural bell curve, has a lot of opportunity for us to fight and disagree about what should be socially accepted. But what we have to do, I think, is make peace with the fact that there are things that should be socially acceptable and things that shouldn't be. This is what all of ethics and philosophy are about. This is what the great religions struggle and grapple with trying to teach us. What should we do and what shouldn't we do? And it can't all be legislated. When you get into the world of we are going to resolve all these things, we're going to turn our culture into this, into no shame, no norms, everything's fine, whatever floats your boat. That if that's our culture, our governance looks like this. That's what actually happens. Because when it doesn't work, the reaction to the failure ain't good. One more idea before we wrap it up. And that is a little different, but I think it's equally important. And that is not so much about behaviors
He's drawing again.
as ideas. Now, I very much believe in the battle of ideas, that we should be able to entertain any idea, even.
Yeah, the marketplace of ideas.
Yes.
But these ideas and these concepts should live and die on their merit, not emotional connection to. You don't like that, so my emotional investment says that you're wrong. No. That's how not grown folks do it. That's how children communicate.
Yes.
They throw fits in the middle of the grocery store, and you're just like, oh my God, stop. But the thing is if they don't get taught at any point, then they have these emotional outbursts as adults in regular conversation when you challenge a concept or idea. And it's just childish people throwing fits.
The most atrocious ones. That's what free speech is all about. But there is, I think, a distribution here of what should be socially acceptable or not. And my proposition is for a curve that looks something like this. On the left, my left, is all things communism. It's all things communism. We tried it. It's mass murderous. It doesn't work.
Facts.
Communism, 0. Communism, fascism is actually has fewer dead bodies associated with it than communism. Communism should be right here. We should be mostly exploring that in terms of why did this idea take hold? Why is it attractive, even though it's manifestly wrong and murderous, even though it can't work economically, even in theory, because of the problems of information and incentives that are baked into how we coordinate in a society? All of that stuff should mean that communism is over here. On the other extreme is anarchism. Now, why is anarchism not down to 0? Well, for me, anarchism at least acknowledges that knowledge is decentralized and dispersed, and that there is some fundamental sense in which people deserve to be left alone to make decisions for themselves. Anarchism says there should be no rulers. We should be free to decide for ourselves what we do, where we live, who we marry or not. All of it, everything should be decided voluntarily.
So that is an interesting distribution. So the communism thing, you're going to end up with rulers regardless, because there's going to be people who are in charge of making decisions, right? They just are. And then they're not going to give their power up down the line, right?
No,
so
that's just nature of human. That's just human nature.
We have laws on the books.
Yeah.
In the United States about proposing communism as a functional concept for governance. Even in the state of California, they have rules about those things. Like in school, you cannot teach this concept as a concept that is acceptable for governance. You just can't, right? So what ends up happening is we end up with a form of social Marxism to get rid of those things, right? That is the reality of that situation, right? But nobody's going to bring suit on it right now based on the progression. So I was watching New Discoveries, and that gentleman has lots to say about that, James Lindsay, about how we've gone from a proletariat with assets and resources to a form of social Marxism, right? And that a lot of the utopia stuff is now a social utopia with words like diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then the changing of the meanings of those words over time, so they're no longer recognizable as functional concepts that don't feed into the utopia.
Yeah, and that's the problem when you hijack language like that.
Mm-hmm.
It waters down what came before.
Right, and then you cannot build cohesive arguments, right? So I was talking before about syllogistic format arguments, which is just I have true and correct premises and then I get true and correct conclusions. But if there's a mode change in a word, right, then the conclusion is immediately false. It's immediate. If the meaning of the word changes in transition, then you cannot come up with any kind of meritocratic concepts that can conjoin and be good. There isn't a way to compromise there because you've changed the meaning of the words in transition. So, philosophy is absolutely a way to assist in critical thinking. And it, I mean, it takes, 3, 4, 5 months to get into a thought process where you can start manipulating these ideas and concepts and have these grown-up conversations and not get your feelings hurt when someone says, I don't think the thing you're saying really comports with reality. Let's explore this concept. You should be like, yes, I want to believe as many true things as possible so that I have a clean thinking process so I can't be duped. So someone can't take advantage of me because I believe wild shit. Just wild shit, right? Oh my God. The cognitive dissonance that I see in youth today is strange. Even my kids are like, they say, Dad, I think some wild shit. And I'm like, that's wild shit, kid. Like, what about this concept? Oh, that hurts my feelings. I'm like,
oh God.
Oh, what do your feelings have to do with things that are real?
Turn around to the mother and say, did we drop him? Dropped him at some point?
No, Mama wouldn't let me carry the kids, so no, I didn't drop the kid. I wasn't allowed to hold it, so I know I didn't make it hit its head weird. It did it on its own. So, all right, let's let him finish cooking on this concept.
Okay. Nobody's allowed to point a gun in your face and say, don't do that. Now, it should be at the fringe because there's never been a large-scale anarchist society. And yes, we have global anarchy. There's no global government, but what we really have is global panarchy because we have a planet of governments. Even so, still better than communism. And at the center, classical liberalism. This is fundamentally, properly understood, Americanism. It is the ideas that underpin the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, that all men are created equal, that we have rights that mean we should be treated equally by the state.
Again, equity as far as if you deserve based on access in the front, not equality of outcome, right? If I give you the best set of education and tools to become successful, that's different than at the end of the line, I just hand out sheepskins and go, here, you get this degree, you get this degree, you get this degree. Here's a job. Here's it. Like, if you didn't earn it, you shouldn't have it, right? Again, So equality of outcome is bad, which is what the word equity has become, right?
But that we should also treat each other as having dignity and therefore shouldn't intrude in each other's lives and commit acts of aggression against each other.
The rights of an Englishman, yep.
each other, and the state exists to protect us from the worst angels of our nature. I think that that should be the most socially acceptable sort of political philosophy. And in a sane academic universe, most academics would be classical liberals. And communism would be studied as something akin to the theories of where fire comes from before science figured that out. And anarchism would be something for philosophy class to imagine a world that was perfectly morally voluntary, in which free will and moral choice guided everything. That's what I got. That's what I've been struggling.
So he uses the term free will there, and that's libertarian free will, and it doesn't technically exist. What actually exists is agency and understanding consequences for actions.
Yeah.
Free will is the ability to have changed a decision you've already made, right? But agency is I understand there are consequences for the action. But what he's saying is in a society where there is no shame, and you can say, I have a truth and my truth is better than your truth because I believe it, right? You are then making another hierarchy, right? And in those hierarchies,
I identify as a lamppost, so now everyone must accept I'm a lamppost because I believe it's true.
I am not a huge fan of this fella, but he has some interesting things to say. Michael Knowles said in an interview with somebody, he said, I identify as the individual who is more correct in this argument. And the other person had made wild statements in the past, and they said, well, you can't do that. He says, you just did that. You told me without saying you identify as being more right that you are in fact more correct on this concept. So I'm just giving you the bare bones of it. I identify as being more right than you in every aspect of this conversation. And since I can now have my truth, that is my truth, therefore we need not argue anymore because I am right. Because I've identified as being right. Right? It's that kind of thing. So let's see how he gets through this concept here.
Struggling with, I am someone who really deeply values individual liberty as an essential virtue. And so individual liberty actually can push you into a world that's kind of like this. And there is a world in which this is a better model. That world is what I call the rule of law. How should our government treat us as individuals? And I think equality under the law is great. I don't want our government treating each of us differently.
So you saw he said equality and not equity.
Yes.
Right? And because again, equity has become an equity of outcome, which is not acceptable for a society to move forward.
No.
Based on our characteristics, I think our government should look at us as citizens and as human beings and treat us all the same. But how we treat each other, how we talk to our kids about what is and is not right and acceptable, we're living in this world. This is what humanity looks like. Men and women on average are different. They're not different in ways that make us impossible to get along. We need each other. We are complementary to each other. In fact, our differences don't separate us so much that great men and great women can't swap roles. You can have very masculine women that achieve incredible things and very feminine men that achieve incredible things in the domains that on average men and women tend to dominate. But pretending that the sexes are this is going to turn us into something horrible. And so I think we have to live in this world. We have to.
Concepts that don't purport with reality for the most part are going to work out like that, honestly.
Yes, honestly, yeah.
Be comfortable with it. I don't want the baseline of this to be death. I think a good society holds this to be true and says, no. What are you doing over there? What are you doing with kids? Get out of here. Into the prison you go. Oh, stealing from people, robbing from people, hurting people, killing people. Off to the box. Treating people fair, treating people right, doing the right thing, being honest. We reward that. We reward those things.
My mama told me that the truth will set me free, Patrick. The truth will set you free.
I think we're all supposed to be. I think all kids should be taught right from wrong, but
right.
Yeah, but they seem to hit third level, they get Very interesting ideas.
Well, a lot of it has to do with they're away from their mama for the first time, and they're away from their
Yes.
dad for the first
Yes.
time, you know? And then you got to understand, when we became a society where both parents had to work and you didn't have that kind of oversight of children, you had
Yes.
latchkey children, then a lot of them were like, well, nobody's here to disagree with the thing that I'm saying or doing, so it must be right. And then they're quirky, and then they try to get into relationships, and their partners are like, why are you doing weird shit, bro? Like, you're weird, right? That's weird. Why are you
Yes,
grabbing
stop
that
it.
pork chop by the bone and putting it in in the applesauce?
Yeah. Oh Lord.
All right, let's let him actually finish this thing out, and then we'll wrap it up ourselves.
What do you think? What am I missing? Where does all of this fall apart? Help me understand this, because I think we have lost some of our shared understanding of right and wrong in this country. And we have a moment right now to grapple with it, I think, and to maybe find some new consensus. And I think our politics has rejected the blank slate.
I think he's right. I think we have a situation where you can no longer use shame to indicate to someone that they have failed. So without a shame indicator, they continue down the line until they commit actual crimes. Not so much I didn't follow some strange rule and now I have some bureaucratic thing, but I am doing things that are actively hurting people because I've never been told, nor do I believe that it is wrong because it is my truth, and no one is shaming me for the thing. No shame, right?
I think the problem with this is we're all trying to wrap up everyone in cotton wool without, as you say, turn around and say, this is wrong. What you're doing is wrong. It's weird. Stop it. You know what I mean? People are scared to say that these days.
Right. So when you were growing up, did you have a park around the way?
Park? Yeah.
Yeah. Would you ever go down to the park and hang out with the boys? Maybe kick the ball
I
around
played a bit when I was younger. Yeah. Curling, football.
Yeah. So when I was a kid, there was a park around the corner. You know, you go out to the park. My dad would be like, hey, get the hell out of my house. Right? Go out there. Find you some sunshine, boy. Get out of my house. You know?
Yes.
And he'd say other wild things like, you know what? I don't mind playing with the kids, but I like playing with the kids' mom more. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to go to the park. Right? That's my dad just saying some wild shit to his, dad say wild. I'm so funny. I love you, Dad. I miss you too. I wish you were here. But when you got to the park and you were hanging out with the fellas and the chicas, we're out of the park, you would stand right there in the center and you'd say something wildly individualistic, and some other kid would come up and slap you up. Shut up, kid. That's dumb. Right?
Yeah.
So the next time you went out to the park, you were like, I'm gonna wait a little bit before I say some wildly individualistic shit.
Yeah.
And then
that's how society.
You would curb your mouth. You would curb your behavior. So with the internet, you have a ton of anonymity, and nobody can punch you in the face. You can just say wild shit over and over, and there's no consequences for saying wild shit. It's a lack of appropriate socialization.
And I see some of the stuff on YouTube and other platforms, and you're looking at you're listening to these people, and you're kind of going, oh my God, your parents didn't slap you enough or slapped you too much. I don't know which in some cases. Some of the stuff that we're coming up with is, as you say, highly personal to them.
Yeah, well, it's very individualistic. Weird. It's not thought through. There's been no market.
The thing is, they end up with an audience which encourages that, and you're kind of going, "Oh no, there's more of these people."
Well, the marketplace of ideas, in their instance, has not been challenged, and you can close yourself off into an echo chamber where the algorithm has you. Right?
Yes.
And I'm not perfect. If I'm wrong, Patrick, be like, yo, Alex, check me. Probably with that Southern Irish, like Cork County accent. And I'd be like, but it's my truth, Patrick. I know I'm right because I'm emotionally invested in it. You'd be like, no, Alex.
What was I trying? Yeah, I don't think we've ever actually had that yet. Yes.
Well, no, but I don't think I've said something so wildly individualistic that I didn't at least think through a little bit beforehand. we've had
Yes.
disagreements. A lot of it has to do with American perceptions of the EU, right? And I'm like, well, I know this thing to be true. And you're like, whoa, hey, Alex,
That's not how it works,
let
but
me give you a little perspective on the EU. Let me tell you what my perception is. And then
Yes.
based on that, I can make better choices scholastically. Yep. I can conceptualize better. I don't have cognitive dissonance on a thing. I don't have American exceptionalism and Europe can go get fucked on my brain. Right?
I think what happens, I think when I'm dealing with people from different countries, I can nearly guess within the first 20 odd minutes of talking to them if they've traveled outside their own country or not. By the way, they just look at other countries outside their own country. I'm thinking of some British lads I know. If they've traveled, they're far more accepted than the common Brit who hasn't left London or whatever. You know what I mean?
They're a little more worldly, right? They have some experiences out there. They've seen some things out there that give them cause to reflect.
Yes. Friends of mine know I know good friends of mine have worked in the oil industry all over the world, and they've been to the Middle East. They've been all over the world, and it's interesting to see them inside pubs arguing with young people over certain protests are going on around the world before we get too deep into that one. And he turned around and he said to these young people, I've been to all the countries you're protesting about right now. They're not nice places.
No, they
never have been nice places.
No.
But if you want to go over there and protest the way you're protesting, good luck.
Yeah, some of the women's rights organizations and anti-slavery groups, I'm like, you need to go visit the places in the world where these things are actually going on.
Yes.
Right? The thing that you're purporting is a bad thing might be a minor inconvenience. In fact, it might be a major issue, but it is not catastrophic like some of these places in the world where these horrific things are going on.
Yeah.
You're passing judgment here, but then you're condoning the behavior of those doing worse things in the same vein wherever they're doing it. And it's just really insane.
It is.
All right, Patrick, close us up, bud.
Wow, I have to say, great video. Absolutely fantastic.
I'm glad I could bring it to
I like his use of modern technology. Absolutely brilliant.
Right? The old pen and paper trick. It
reminds us very much of ourselves.
Yeah, it was like arts and crafts today with John Popola from Dad Saves America.
And I have to say, I've seen his channel before, so it's really, really interesting channel. It's really, really well put together. Really nice. Really seems like a really nice dude.
Well, he's got a way better producer than we do, so what are you going to say? Better editor, the whole nine.
He got the whole lot. He's got the whole lot going on.
Yeah. Well, no, and the concepts were well thought through, and I thought that was pretty good.
Yes, so. Very well done. Very well done.
All right, so like and subscribe, click the bell, do the things. We would greatly appreciate it. Leave a comment, help us fight the algorithm war. We appreciate your time, and we will see you in the next one. We are